Have you ever wanted to use a certain background image on a section while you're creating a page with Divi, but perhaps as you see here, there's too many white spots in the background. There's a lot of color variation that makes laying text over it difficult. And the obvious answer might seem, well, just bring it into a photo editing software and darken it or make some changes to it. But if you're a bootstrapping business owner, you may not have access to that kind of software. Or if you're like me, sometimes you're thinking, I don't want to create 5 versions of the same image and have all of them swimming around in my media library in WordPress. And is there a better way? Today we're going to go through a quick video of yes there is, and here's a cool little workaround that you might be able to use while you're in Divi to accomplish this. So, as you can see here, good example of it. This is a photo of cityscape of Winston-Salem. Let's say that contextually this made a lot of sense for whatever this page was about, and as you can see, the white text here is not that legible over top of it. Simplest way to fix that would be to darken this background image. You can do that by, in this case, clicking the settings for your section, going under background. You can see here where I have used this image, and then we're going to click this option right here, which is a background gradient. Say you want to add a gradient, it'll default to colors here, and you'll want to make sure that this is checked. That makes the gradient appear over top the background image. You won't notice the effects of what we're about to do if you don't do that. And in this case, I started with just selecting black, and then you can drag the opacity meter down here. I went to about 35%. And if you just want a solid color overlay, do the same thing on the secondary color, and then hit check. And you'll see that it considerably darkened this background picture such that the white text is a lot easier to read. If you think that that's still not easy enough to read, a couple things you could do. You could apply a mild text shadow to it to bring it off of that even harder, or just go back into here, go to your settings here, and you would be increasing this number. You'd be adding more opacity, and as you see, as I increase that number, it makes it progressively darker. Try to get them to match. At this point, that's starting to make the background a little hard to see, but it certainly makes the white text stand out. And even in this case, where the background isn't that distinct anymore, it's more interesting than just using a simple black background with nothing to it. That's certainly one thing you can do, and now you don't have to have multiple versions of this same image floating in your media library. You've got the one that you could use in a variety of ways throughout your site and make it look different. Here's one other situation I could see that you would use these gradients to do some cool effects. Scroll down the page a little bit. Say that you have, like this, a section with a solid, very dark background, and you're ultimately going to end up with a white background. And you want something that links the two so that it looks like there's some continuity. In here, we would go to the same section and say that we want to set up a gradient, but here's where those two different color spots come into effect. Essentially, I got the hex code of the background from here and set the beginning of this gradient for this section to that same number so that we're starting with that color and fading down to the secondary color that we've selected, which in this case is just pure white. You can set the gradient type, whether it's radial, meaning it's going out in a circular fashion, or linear, meaning it's just going from start to finish, which in this case is what we want. There's a gradient direction, 180 degrees is top to bottom. In this case, that's what we want. If you were ever in a situation where you wanted to create like a slanted effect, where it began as maybe one color and slanted into another, which is kind of a cool look, you can start dragging this left to right, and you can see how that does in a 360 degree rotation change where the first and second color are going to begin and stop. I'll put it back to 180 for now. Start position and end position just affect where in this entire section it's going to start. If you didn't want it to start in the very beginning of the section, you could type something like 15%, and that's telling it actually leave the background, your primary color, for longer before it starts fading. And in the same way, if you wanted there to be more white at the bottom here, we could say 90% instead of 100%, and that's telling it stay white at the end for more of the section than just the end, which in this case actually does help it blend a little better so you can experiment. And if you wanted to create a section that, like I said, bridges the gaps between these two, that's another area that you can use these gradients to do it. That should allow you to use a much wider array of backgrounds without having an issue with your text, especially if it's a background like this one that has some dark colors right against light colors. Those types of background images can be really tricky to get text to look good over top just because there's so much variation. You find yourself in a scenario where some parts of the image you need dark text, some of it you need light text, and there's no way to get uniformity there. This, as you can see, creates that uniformity. Thanks, guys. Catch you in the next video.